Alaihi Wasallam, through which every good has come to us. The oppressor and the oppressed. Zalim, the oppressor. Madloom, the oppressed. Today, I wanted to speak in regards to some qualities of dhulm. And then, I wanted to speak about some qualities of those that are madloom. The first is to look at the zalim. Oppression has pillars, 5 pillars. When they are present, the equation of subjugation becomes complete. These pillars are fixed. They're found in every single civilization that oppresses someone else, regardless of race, religion, or even the era. What changes are the faces, the presidents, the kings, the employees. But the underlying principles, they stay the same. These are mentioned in the books of Tariq. Now, in the eyes of Muslims, the symbol, the paragon, the idea of oppression has become embodied in the person of Fir'aun, the Pharaoh. The story with Musa alayhi salam is perhaps the most repeated story in the Quran. On its own, it is a subtle indication of the story of oppression. Why did Allah mention it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it because this oppression will be repeated during the time. It was there at the time of Fir'aun. It's going to be there in the time of Musa alayhi salam. It's going to be there in the time of Sulaiman alayhi salam. In the time of Dawood alayhi salam. It's going to be there in the time of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And it's going to be there until the day of judgment. This oppression is going to continue. That's why it's mentioned in the Quran. And the pillars of oppression of these eras of time are identical. So what are these pillars? The first pillar is arrogant authority. Kibr. The first pillar is in reference to an authority that considers itself immune to any accountability. I can do whatever I want and you can't say anything. An authority that views criticism as rebellion. If you say something against me, you can be killed. If you say something against me, I will send the police force to your house. They will come and bring swift justice by executing you. Now, if we were to rewind back to the story of Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun, you find this first pillar is represented by who? Fir'aun himself. His reign was unchallenged. His opinion was above the law. And he considers his advisors as a opposition. Or jail them, or torture them, or execute them. This is the first pillar of oppression. Whenever you have a tyrannical regime, an authority, we can apply each of these pillars to the events happening around us in 2024. The wars that are happening. We can look at those people that are proponing. They may prop up certain ideals. When it comes to it, they are oppressing an entire people. Killing, pillaging, stealing, raping, murdering, taking land, not giving it back. Nobody can check them. Nobody can say a word. Laws of the country don't matter. International laws don't matter. The second pillar of oppression is called the hypocritical minister. This second pillar of oppression is a minister or ministers that cozy up to the authority. They reassure the authority that you are justified. You know, when you're about to do something stupid and you turn to your friend, you're about to, let's say a kid is swinging on the chair and you're about to, make the kid fall off by pushing the chair. You turn to your friend and you say, hey, do you reckon wouldn't it be funny if I pull the chair and the kid falls back? Now that friend, if he gives you the advice that no, it's okay. You can do as much as you want. You are above the law. Will you do it? You'll do it. The same thing is there for a crime. So let's say you and your friend are going to the shops. You have certain things that you cannot afford. So you go into the shops, you put it in your pocket, and before you walk out, or before you take the item, you ask your friend, hey, what do you think? We can't pay for this, but we should just, take it. And he says to you, no, we don't do that. We Muslims don't do that. Or for whatever reason he tells you, don't do it. and you don't do it. These are two advisors. The one I'm speaking about is the former. The one that inspires you to evil. He gives you applause. This is the second pillar. It's important to have these pillars for oppression, dhulm. If you rewind back to the story of Prophet Musa, who was the second pillar? Haman. The Pharaoh's minister. His name was Haman. We can apply this to tyrannical leaders. Look at the presidents. There will always be other presidents or other advisors that are supporting it, encouraging it. Clap hands. Make sure weapons are sent. Make sure military aid is sent. Make sure that the media is crunched. Those people around the tyrannical oppressor that are ready to do anything that is needed. This is the second pillar. Whether it's murder, it doesn't matter. The third pillar of oppression are the finances. Every suppressive regime requires wealth to do something. You have to have a personal interest. How do you fund it? They vehemently oppose any efforts for reformation. Their status and their position will be affected. So they extend a generous hand. They give as much funds as the president needs. They give as much funds as the country needs. Now, if we were to rewind back to the story of Musa alayhi salam, this third pillar of oppression is represented by Qarun, who was, of course, the wealthiest of human beings at that time. He was a financial supporter of who? Fir'aun, the tyrannical king. The fourth pillar of oppression is the religious authority. You know who that is? This is the imams, the khatibs. They paint the injustice that's happening, or they don't talk about it. They justify the oppression that is happening from the minbar, from the churches, from the synagogues. They don't say anything. Even if they are blatantly contradictory to Islam, to Christianity, to Judaism, but they do it in the guise of maslahah. They justify it with this word, maslahah, necessity, darura. And they praise the authority that is doing divinely inspired things. They are scholars that sell their own religion for a petty return of the world. If you rewind back to the story of Prophet Musa, this fourth pillar was represented by who? What was the religion? What was the deen of that time? Do you know? The deen of that time was magic. So this was represented by the greatest magicians that ever existed. The greatest magicians were these people for Fir'aun. And by extension, the different religions that existed in that time, and their clergy, the imams, the khatibs, the churches, the leaders in these buildings of faith, what did they contribute to the oppression of the people? Perhaps they stayed quiet at a time when it is not appropriate to stay quiet. They gave verdicts, they gave fatwas, all to support who? The oppression, the act of oppression. And then you have the fifth and final pillar, which is the media. No dictatorship can exist without media. It is a body that swallows the public opinion, and it only covers the stories that glorify it. And they turn a blind eye to those stories that may retract from it. If we were to rewind back to the story of Musa alayhi salam, this fifth pillar of oppression is represented by the gatherers. You know who the gatherers are? Those that rushed out into the street and they congregated the masses. And they witnessed the duel that happened between Prophet Musa and all the magicians. Who are the people that actually went out and got everyone to come to that one place? That is represented by the media. The media campaigns. هل أنتم مجتمعون? Will you all not gather? لعل نتبع السحرة إن كانوا هم الغالبين. So that we may follow the magicians if they are victorious. Look at the condition. Look at the wording. If the magicians are victorious, we'll follow. What if they are not victorious? Will you then follow Prophet Musa? If he's victorious over the magicians, well, guess what? They didn't even consider mentioning this to the people. It's not a viable option. They wish to sway the public opinion, to only give them one version of the events, to serve the authority. So these are the 5 pillars of dhulm. If any one of these is missing, the building of oppression will come crashing down. So you need to have all 5 for the perfect system. The political scene of today, particularly in much of the Muslim world, displays, subhanAllah, how similar Musa alayhi salam time was for us. You know, subhanAllah, sometimes we read the Quran and we're like, we can't relate to this. Subhanallah. Humul ghalibun. We read the Quran without understanding, and we think, how on earth is this book that was revealed 1400 years ago going to help me today? Oh, this is me connecting today to the time of Musa alayhi salam. That was more than 1400 years ago. Now this tells you categorically that history will repeat itself. The political scene of today, in much of the Muslim world, displays, subhanallah, how similar yesterday used to be from today. And in the great story of our Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he was faced with a monumental task. You need to go, O Musa, and topple the king and his kingdom. How did he choose to do it? He picked the oppressive pillars, these 5 pillars, and he combated them from the inside out. Remember here, Musa alayhi salam is one man. He's an authentic prophet of Allah. Now tell me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself speaks to this man. I mean, you know, if someone, your friend tells you, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to me yesterday in my dream. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes and I can hear a voice in the room. Oh, I don't know, man, you're maybe a little cuckoo, you know. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really does speak to me and is giving me direct commands. And He has told me to march in to, the United Nations office when all of the great leaders and kings are there. And He is saying categorically that you single-handedly need to topple all the empires that exist in 2024. Really, He told me that. What are you going to say to this man? Man, you're crazy. You are crazy. This is what Fir'aun was at that time. He was just one man. Imagine, you know, the President of the United States, the President of Australia, the President of... If there was a broadcast, you know, live broadcast, and in that, the President of the country says the words, these 3 words, you would instantly not speak about him or speak any good of him anymore. You know what those 3 words are? I am God. I am God. Any president, any military leader, if he speaks these 3 words, that's an instant way to switch off humanity. People are just never ever going to take this person seriously again. Now imagine, Fir'aun had so much power in his time that he said these 3 words and nobody said anything. He said, I am God. And nobody said anything. And the average person listened to this khutbah of his and they went out and they said, yeah, he probably is. I mean, that's how much power he had at that time. Now the combined powers of all the countries don't have this much power. At that time, Fir'aun has this much power. And what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying? Go and topple his whole kingdom. Now how do you prove? What was Musa alayhi salam given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to prove that he's... So when you're having this conversation, I received these messages from God, He has told me to do this, you say, you're crazy. Then, if you're an authentic messenger, you know what you're supposed to do? Okay? You know what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to produce a supernatural event which can only be done by someone that is being helped by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is called a mu'jiza. This, when it's given to a prophet, is called a mu'jiza. When it's given to a non-prophet, it is called a karama. Okay? So the Prophet Musa alayhi salam was given miracles to prove that he is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Authentic. The equivalent of superpowers. Upon witnessing the miraculous signs, Fir'aun and the people in his court, they hesitated. They're like, human beings cannot do this. A normal person, when he sees a miracle, what would they do? They would think, they would ponder. It would change their entire spectrum of which way they're headed. Fir'aun, what was his reaction? Being an oppressor, being in a state of power, the upper hand, what was his reaction when he saw the miracles? The Pharaoh descended into further arrogance. He said, there's a duel that is necessary. You've got magic, I've got magic too. Your Lord can give life, I can also give life. Your Lord can kill, I can also kill. So Musa alayhi salam realized that this guy, he's a bit cuckoo. So he proposed this duel. If you really think this is magic, if you really think that this is magic and not something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I accept. I accept this duel. يوم الزينة وأن يحشر الناس ضحى. Your appointment is on the day of the festival. Let the people assemble in the big Colosseum. There is a public opinion that Prophet Musa alayhi salam wants to influence. Nothing must obscure this. فَتَوَلَّى فِرْعَوْنَ فَجَمَعَ كَيْدَهُ ثُمَّ أَتَى. The Pharaoh went away. He put together his plan. And then he came. Before the duel began, Musa and his brother on one side, and thousands of magicians on the other side, and overseen by the Pharaoh. Musa offered one word of advice. Do you know what he said to his opposition? These words are amazing. He said to the magicians that he was going to face, thousands of them, Sunnah ilahiyya, a divine law of Allah is, that does not and cannot change. قَالَ لَهُ Musa. Musa said to the magicians, وَيْلَكُمْ, woe to you. لَا تَفْتَرُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ كَذِبًا. Do not invent a lie against Allah. فَيُسْحِتَكُمْ بِعَذَابٍ. Or He will exterminate, punish you. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ افترى. And he who lies has failed. He who lies has failed. So there were people that were lying in all fronts. There were the people that were lying in the media, the people that were lying in the presidential, the people that were lying in all the layers before that. They were just, the whole thing, the whole castle was built on lies. You saw the miracle that Musa alayhi salam did. Human beings cannot do that. How is it possible that he did that? And then they lied about it, and they lied about it, and they lied about it, and they just kept lying. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, through the tongue of Musa alayhi salam to the magicians, that if you lie like this, you go down this path, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will destroy you. So, Musa alayhi salam gave a summary of one action that they could do. Imam Ibn Qayyim said, وَقَدْ ضَمِنَ سُبْحَانَهُ أَنَّهُ لَا بُدَّ أَنْ يَخِيبَ أَحْلُ الْإِحْتِرَاءِ وَلَا يَهْدِيَهُمْ وَأَنَّهُ يَسْحَطَهُمْ بِعَذَابٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed that the people of lying must fail, and that He must not guide them, but He will uproot them. What are the categories of lying which this principle encompasses? To list but a few, if you forge a lie against Allah, example of this is those who dare issuing Islamic verdicts. They don't have any studies behind them. No, brother, is this chicken halal? Brother, is vaping allowed? Am I allowed to wear these kind of clothes? Brother, is this? And then the other brother that has no Islamic understanding, no actual study behind him. And by actual study, I mean 6 to 10 years of full-time study. Okay? Experience, at least a decade of experience. Okay? In Pakistan, the muftis, and in the south area of Jordan, Sana'a, you know, the muftis that I saw, they had 40 plus years of experience just to issue a question-answer verdict. And subhanAllah, people are forwarding messages to each other with fatwas, and they're like, just use this, man. I found this on Google. This is the answer to your question. This is not an Islamic value. This is lying against Allah. Allah Almighty, وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَا تَصِفُوا أَلْسِنَتُكُمُ الْكَذِبَ هَذَا حَلَالٌ وَهَذَا حَرَامٌ لِتَفْتَرُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبَ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَفْتَرُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبَ لَا يُفْلِحُونَ. Do not falsely declare with your tongues, with your mobiles. This is lawful and this is unlawful. Fabricating lies against Allah. Indeed, those that fabricate lies against Allah will never succeed. And that is why Imam Malik said, من أجاب في مسألة فينبغي قبل الجواب أن يعرض نفسه على الجنة والنار. Subhanallah. وكيف خلاصه ثم يجيب. Whoever answers a question should first consider to themselves before heaven and hell, and then provide the response. This is why the predecessors were always saying, La adri, la adri, la adri. I don't know. I don't know. Let me go and research and find the answer and come back to you. Nobody says this anymore. How come nobody says this anymore? Worship, finance, family life. This is a signature on behalf of the Prophet ﷺ and Allah. When you give a fatwa, every lecture, every post, every comment, was it the product of astute understanding, grounded knowledge, genuine sincerity, a forged signature? In this case, وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنِ افْتَرَى. He who has lied has failed. A second category of lying. Forge a lie against people. One was for Allah, one is for people. Now, imagine you give intentionally false information. For fame, for viewers, they want the hype, they want to sell. So some do it for a financial return. They lie about their products. Dispute of a colleague with work. Some do it out of envy. Some do so against family members to harm them and save themselves. That's why people lie. To get something from the dunya, they lie. Reputational, like let's say child custody, they lie in court. This is a generic lie against people. Every single time, وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنِ افْتَرَى. He who has lied has failed. I want you to now take a look at what is happening with our brothers and sisters in Palestine. There has been a consistent pattern to Israel's behavior since its creation 75 or 100 years ago. Every politician, an established journalist, is pretending that they cannot see it. There is a collective and willful refusal to join the dots, even when they all point to one direction. The Zionist project and its representatives, from the day of inception till today, is based on lies against Allah and against the people. As for the lies against Allah, they include that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was sorry for creating the sons of Ishmael. Or the lie that Ibrahim, all non-Jews, were born to serve Israel. They need to die. The Palestinians need to die. These are all lies. That Allah is instructing the king that kill the cattle, the sheep, the men, the women. From the Hebrew Bible. Publicly invoked before the assault of Gaza, Netanyahu, the president, mentioned these verses. As for the lies against people, Israel was founded on lies. The lie that Palestinian land was unoccupied, as promoted by British author Israel Zandwill, when he repeated the slogan that Palestine was apparently a land for the people without a land. And after realizing this was not true, they were blossoming a vibrant community in Palestine. Then the founders of Zionism, and they labeled him a traitor. This author. 750,000 Palestinians left their homes during the ethnic cleansing by militias in 1948 because they were told to do so by Arabs. Arab army started it? What are you talking about? 78% of the land was taken. The lie that Israel faced annihilation, 1967, forcing it to invade and occupy the rest of it. Now that land jumped to 93% occupied. Palestinian agricultural communities, they had destroyed. They are in fact 500 wiped away from the face of the earth. Bulldozed. Army sappers. The lie that Israel respects the rule of law. No, only Muslims are targeted. You find nothing but piles of civilians. There's no armed bodies that they're finding. Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital, 500 were killed in one strike. A Palestinian rocket caused this. The Shifa Hospital was a military base, mashallah, using the facility as a command and control center to store weapons and hold hostages, despite this being debunked by the Washington Post and the BBC. The IDF nevertheless besieged that country. They sniped them through the windows. They raided the hospitals. They bombed sections of it. And they withdrew and they refused to comment. No comment. The lie that the Palestinians have been faking their own deaths and the deaths of their children. It is plain to see. Just take a video, take a shot, it's plain to see. The lie that Israel will support the Palestinian state, the two-state solution. That was never going to happen. In a sea of barbarism, the lies are so intense that the former president of France, in a G20 summit, he turned to Barack Obama at the time of Obama being the president. You know what he said to him? He was unaware that there was a microphone next to him. Netanyahu, I cannot stand him. He's a liar. Israel's Prime Minister, Netanyahu, is currently considering lie detector tests on his own security cabinet. That's how much they lie. It's sustained by lies. It cannot even explain its lies. In the words of Chris Hedges, children killed by Israelis are children caught by crossfire. The bombing of residential districts with dozens of dead and wounded becomes a surgical strike on the bomb-making factory. The destruction of Palestinian homes becomes the demolition of the homes of terrorists. Finally, the world is waking up now. 2024, 3 months after this war started. No longer can they lie. They can't bully anymore. Now it dawns on the world. We cannot be colonial and liberal. We cannot be democratic and secular. Secular and fanatic. We cannot be oppressive. We cannot be an apartheid state and also be inhumane. This is one of the words of the Quran. You know what the Quran is called? Al-Furqan. It takes a room full of people and it crosses a line right through the middle and it divides them into two groups. Two very neat groups. Everyone says, brother, there's a lot of gray areas in Islam. Not when there are trials like this happening in the world. Not when there are trials like this happening from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It'll be clear who you are. It is coming into full وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ افترى. He who lies fails. I conclude by telling you about these oppressors. What was the story that we were discussing? Prophet Musa and Harun accepted the duel from Fir'aun. Their only condition was that it should be conducted in a public place. Up until this point, Pharaoh had succeeded in hiding the lies through the media. But now it was in the main stadium. Uncovering what Musa and Harun alayhi salam always knew. This is what infuriated him. When Musa alayhi salam defeated thousands of sorcerers with one movement of his hand. Thousands on one side. Imagine a coliseum, a big stadium. 1,000 people on one side, 2 people on one side. One of them just releases something from his hand and everything is destroyed. When you see this, when you're in the bleachers watching this happen, it completely discredits all of the lies that you've been hearing, and it completely discredits who your king is. Completely discredits it. He used this to control the people, and his claim of supremacy was propaganda. So, blinded by rage, he embarked on a witch hunt on the believers, calling for a final solution. It was this arrogant reaction that fast-tracked the Pharaoh into going into his grave. It drove him and his army into the end. So Allah's promise, my dear Muslims, is true. If you are part of these lies, if you are part of these tyrannical kingdoms, if you are part of the 5 pillars that I discussed, you are with the oppressors, and your end is that you are going to fail in this world, and you're going to fail in the hereafter. Palestine. the true inheritors of Prophet Musa, also accepted the challenge of, despite standing alone, abandoned by the Muslim countries, non-Muslim countries, duel was imposed upon it. For the first time, Palestine, social media has made it public. Palestinians always knew. They've been going through this for the last 100 years. But today it's become open. Everyone knows now. The well-oiled propaganda machine is not working anymore. The world has seen the trickery of the magicians. The pharaohs of today are in fact a fraud. And the world is choosing a path of truth and justice. So driven by rage. You know what they've done? They are killing an entire population. This is fast-tracking their undoing. This is going to be marked in the books of history as the turning point of Palestine and its freedom. Let us now turn our attention to the second topic that I wanted to discuss. The first was the oppressor. The second is the oppressed, madloom. Now there is one quality above all that a madloom, a person that is being oppressed, needs to display. And that quality is patience, sabr. Although this person is acting, or he or she are doing whatever they can to act, to do something, because they're going to be accountable for their actions on the Day of Judgment, they still need to display patience when they are in that situation. I will relate to you two stories and we'll finish. The first of them, Ibn Mukhalli Khan mentioned this in his Tarikh, his book. A group of men came from the tribe of Abs. During the same time, one of those men was blind. So Al-Walid, the Khalifa, he sees the man that's blind, and he says, "What's your story? What happened to your eyes?" He says, "I was once in a valley, tending to my property. And I looked around and I realized, no one has more property than me. I have the most land. SubhanAllah, then a torrent of rain came, and it destroyed everything that I had. All of my family died. And all of my livestock, my farm, my property was leveled to the ground in one night. I was left with nothing but a camel and my youngest son. These two things. And I was attending to my camel to try and restrain it, but the camel ran away. I chased after the camel, and I heard my son screaming. So I turned to my son, and his head was inside the mouth of a wolf, and he died. The wolf killed him. I turned to the camel, and he kicked me straight in the head, and it burst both of my eyes. So in one night, I lost all of my wealth, all of my property, all of my family. And I was left with two things. And the camel and the child also, they took away from me. So Al-Walid ibn Abdul Malik, you know what he said? When he heard this amazing story, he said, "Take this man to Urwa bin Mas'ud." Now if this was not a khutbah and it was interactive, I would ask you, who knows who Urwa is? Urwa bin Zubayr. So that he understands, the person who's, the Urwa bin Zubayr is the son of who? Zubayr bin Awam. One of the 10 people that was given glad tidings of Jannah. Now why on earth would the king, or the Khalifa of that time, hear the story of this man, which was a terrible story. He went through a lot. And he tell him to go to Urwa bin Zubayr. How come? He must have an even more amazing story. He's a tabi'i, second generation. He was a muhaddith, scholar, a mu'arrikh, historian. One of the 7 famous jurists of Medina. He was a righteous worshipper and a scholar. He has a fascinating story pertaining to patience. And this is the second story. Urwa was traveling from Medina to Damascus. This is mentioned in almost all of our books of history. And during the journey, he began to experience a pain in his foot. And by the time he reached Damascus, he discovered it is al-akala, it's gangrene. And it was so severe that by the time he reached Damascus, his entire foot was consumed by this, changed color. So he entered into the gathering of Al-Walid ibn Abdul Malik, who was the Khalifa at the time. And he said to him, "I need you to see something." And he showed him his leg. So the Khalifa, he gathered all of the greatest surgeons to assess the situation. This is akala, this is gangrene. It's a consensus among the doctors that it needs to be cut. So, who came next? They brought the jazzar. The narration says, you know what the jazzar is? The butcher. Who else is going to amputate your leg? They didn't have sophisticated medicine at that time. They said to Urwa, Yusqiq al-khamr, we want to give you a drink of alcohol to knock you out. No, I will never drink alcohol because it displeases Allah. Nusqiq al-murqid, we need to give you something that will put you to sleep. He said, I don't want a limb of mine to be taken away without me feeling the pain of that cutting. As he was speaking, he saw a group of men coming into the room. Who are these people? These will be the people that will hold you down when we're cutting your leg. And he said to them, so now, what do we have so far? You're conscious. You're not taking anesthetic. We don't have sophisticated methods of chopping off your leg. And we need people to hold you down because obviously we can't just chop off your leg. And he told the people, go home. Go away. I'm not going to move, inshallah. I won't move. I don't think anyone will need to hold me down if you cut my leg off. So he began to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dhikr, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah. And the surgeon or the jazzar began. He took out the knife and he began to cut through the skin. No, nothing, no anesthetic. He's cutting through the skin, muscles, the nerves, the veins, until he got to the bone. And then he removes the knife and he brings another knife. Because to cut through the bone, you need something else. Until the foot is completely detached. And this man hasn't moved and he hasn't said anything. Then they bring a boiling vessel of oil to seal the wound. It's bleeding. Yani he's going to die. And they dip his leg inside and he passes out of the pain. Moments later, he wakes up and he finds himself wiping the sweat away. And he opens his arms and he sees eyes and they're carrying his foot. He said, give me the foot. So they gave Urwa the foot and he kisses it. And he says, Ama walladhi hamal al-hadith. I swear by the one who carried you all throughout life. إِنَّهُ لَا يَعْلَمُ أَنِّي مَا مَشَيْتُ بِكِ الْحَرَكَ الْمَاسِيَةِ. Never in my life did I use this leg to walk towards a single sin. This leg that he's holding. Then during the same journey, news was conveyed to Urwa. They said to him that we're really sorry. Your younger son, who you left back home, he was in a nearby stable and the camel kicked him and he didn't make it. He died, yani, he's dead. He didn't utter a single word of discontent. All the way until he left Damascus. And now he's coming back to Medina. He got to the area of Wadi al-Qura. And they heard him say the words of Prophet Musa. لَقَدْ قَدِينَا مِنْ سَفَرِنَا هَذَا نَصَبًا. This journey of ours has been a difficult one. And then he made a dua. Oh Allah, I used to have 7 children. 7. You have left me now with 6. I used to have 4 limbs. And you have left me now with 3. فَلَئِنِ ابْتَلَيْتَ فَلَقَدْ عَافَيْتَ وَإِنْ أَخَذْتَ فَقَدْ أَعْطَيْتَ. So, oh Allah, if you have tested me in this way, I remember that you have given me goodness for so many years. And if you have taken things away from me, you have left me with so much more. So my dear Muslims, we have looked at the oppressor, who we make dua against. And we have looked at the oppressed, that display patience. We make dua for these people. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right now, oh Allah, guard and safeguard us and our families, and the Muslims and the human beings from the oppressors. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make ease of the difficulty that the oppressed are suffering everywhere around the world. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change our hearts, change our conditions, and ask us to allow us to do a tawbah, change our lives, change what we do in them, such that we become representatives of Islam on this earth followers of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because whether you are an oppressor or you're an oppressed, the way out, the exit sign is Islam, the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It will teach you how to go from an oppressor to a servant of Allah. It will take you from being in the position of the oppressed to becoming a servant of Allah. When you are a servant of Allah, nothing can harm you. You have won. You are successful in this life and in the next. ذلك الفوز الكبير. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.